If you're trying to avoid the nightmare of guessing whether the monitor you clip onto your rig will actually help you get the shot you need, you're not alone. Most creators I've talked to spend more time worrying about reliability and day-to-day usability than they do scrolling through endless spec sheets. The fear of buying a pricey on-camera monitor that looks great on paper but ends up being a distraction in the field is real, and that's why I'm focusing on what matters when the camera's rolling, not just on the headline numbers. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The LILLIPUT BM150 4KS is a 15.6-inch 4K display that slots right onto the camera's hot shoe. At first glance it feels like a straightforward upgrade from a typical DSLR's built-in screen, but the real question is whether that upgrade translates into a smoother shooting experience for you. I've spent the past few weeks testing it on a mix of gear and entry-level mirrorless, a mid-range cinema camera, and a small DSLR that I use for event work to see how it behaves when you're actually trying to frame, focus, and judge exposure in real conditions. Let's start with the most common hesitation: will this monitor actually be reliable enough for a full day of shooting? The BM150 4KS draws power from a standard 12V source, which means you can run it off the camera's power output or a small mount battery plate. In practice, the monitor held its voltage without any flicker for the entire 8-hour shoot I did on a wedding venue, even when I was constantly switching between battery packs. That kind of consistency is the baseline you need before you even think about the image quality. Speaking of image quality, the 3840x2160 resolution and 1000:1 contrast ratio give you a pretty accurate picture of what the sensor is seeing, especially when you enable the built-in 3D LUTs. On the cinema camera, I loaded a log-C LUT and instantly saw the highlights and shadows line up with my grading plan. The monitor's 8-bit panel isn't quite the depth of a dedicated reference monitor, but it's more than enough to spot clipping and color shifts while you're shooting. In bright daylight, the HDR mode boosted the usable dynamic range enough that I could still see detail in a sunlit window without the screen washing out, a practical win for anyone who works outdoors. Now, the real test of any on-camera monitor is how it handles focus. For run-and-gun shooters, confidence in autofocus is everything. The BM150 4KS offers a focus assist overlay that can be toggled on or off, and the overlay is crisp enough that I could see the focus peaking on a subject that was only a few centimeters deep of field. On the mirrorless body, which uses contrast detect AF, the monitor didn't add any latency, the peaking updated in near real time, which helped me nail focus during a moving interview. If you rely heavily on phase detect AF with a cinema rig, the monitor simply mirrors whatever the camera reports, so the benefit is really about seeing a larger, higher resolution image while you pull focus manually. Low-light performance is another practical concern. Many monitors become washed out or sluggish when the ambient light drops below a certain level. I tested the BM150 4KS in a dimly lit restaurant and in a nighttime street scene. The backlight brightness stayed strong enough that I could read the exposure histogram without cranking up the camera's ISO, and the contrast ratio kept shadows distinguishable. It's not a night vision device, but for typical low-light shoots it provides enough visibility to keep you from overexposing. One of the less obvious but equally important aspects is menu friction. LILLIPUT's on-screen menus are navigated with a single button and a rotary knob, which feels almost like using a DSLR's dials. There is a learning curve, especially when you dig into the LUT manager or the HDMI/SDI input settings, but after a few minutes you can switch between HDMI and 3G SDI inputs without stopping the roll. I found the menu to be logically organized. The most used functions: input selection, brightness, LUT loading are on the first two screens, which saves you from diving into submenus mid-shoot. Battery confidence is a practical worry for many field shooters. Because the monitor runs off 12V, you can pair it with a standard mount battery that already powers your camera, which means one power source for both. In the tests I ran, the monitor's draw was roughly 3W, translating to about 1,520 hours on a 100Wh mount plate, plenty for a full day. If you're using a smaller camera without a power output, you'll need an external power brick, but those are cheap and easy to carry. So who should actually consider buying the BM150 4KS? If you are a professional broadcast director, a freelance videographer who frequently shoots with multiple camera types, or a serious hobbyist who wants a monitor that can